gonna look at you, and then you
Cool.
can look at me later.
Yes.
So did you change the card?
Yes,
All
the
right.
card is clean now.
So do you want to ask the question again, Edwin?
Yeah. So you both, nice to have you here. And
Hello.
Hi, thanks for having
I
us.
just want to ask you if this like Club Lightwave session was beneficial in comparison to these sessions you normally make without light. What changed? I mean, what was better?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was an experiment. So we allowed ourselves to find out if things work or don't work, and that sort of took out a bit of pressure. And as such, one of the things that I really liked and feedback that I got was that it intensified the experience for many people. This 5 rhythms practice that we do has a sort of a meditational quality. And one of the things that we were trying to do with this Club Lightwave is to find a connection to the clubbing world in Berlin, and to sort of bring. The experiment was how to have a meditative quality and the club world sort of touch each other, and if that's at all possible, to bring meditative qualities to a club setting. And we played around with this, and I think it was sort of walking an edge in that if it becomes too distractive, the meditative quality is at risk. All right? And but then, we wanted to do something with this, not just do the same old thing. So for me, it was a big learning curve in that at one point I was also tempted to play more clubby music. And so it was new territory for me. And it worked for some people quite well. And for some people, it didn't work at all. There was one guy who's sort of more of a yogic person, and he didn't like it at all. He felt it was too clubby, and the music was too loud, and the lights were distracting. But we had, not just during the wave itself, we used the light and the setting at the end to create an intimate closing. And I felt in that way, that was really surprising how much the light dimension added. It was, we really created a communal setting with the light. That was a quiet setting at the end. So, man, it was sort of a beast to ride. And it definitely inspired me to experiment, not just, with light and with Edwin, but in general, to open up the format. And I think this is what we did. We opened up the format and created and allowed for inspiration to evolve this practice, because this practice it's been around for a long time. Sometimes it can feel a little bit stale. It's the same words, it's the same settings, it's the same routine, and I think we broke this open at least a little bit, and we'll see where we go with it. So yes, most definitely beneficial. Most definitely.
Thank you very much. So Samar, how did you experience that?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that has been fascinating to me about the world of 5 rhythms and other conscious spaces I spend time in is there seems to be a divide by the people that end up in those spaces and the people that I work with every day. So I work in an office setting a lot of the time as a behavioral researcher. And what the Club Lightwave allowed us to experiment with, and in my part of the experiment, was bring in people that have never considered to enter a space like 5 rhythms or a similar type of practice. And so it was riding this edge between a conscious dance practice and just going and having a really good fucking sweaty dance. And the feedback that I got from the people that had never been in a space like that before was a sense of freedom and a sense of release. But at the same time, there were a few people that have danced 5 rhythms for many years, and they found the stimulation of the light and what we had offered them from a projective perspective to be quite intense. But another thing that I offered to the space, and one of the benefits I found about the practice, is every moment of every day is an opportunity to meditate. And so when we're in these like super quiet spaces where everything is still and serene, it's kind of easy to get into my like meditative space. But we live in Berlin, and I spend a lot of my life in urban settings. So in those moments, like, what is meditation like? And so with that perspective, like, how am I reacting to the music, to the environment around me, and to this light stimulation, so that I'm also in a meditative state as a way to embody a meditative spirit on a daily basis. So that was one of my favorite aspects about the project, that it offered that.
Thank you very much. So we've had in the installation a room-in-a-room concept, which also affected that we had an inside and outside. This created something special with the audience also. Can you describe what it did?
Should I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, yes. So the risk of having two different portions on the dance floor is that there's a separation between people being and dancing on one side of it and the people dancing on the other side of it. And so it's on the how should I say, on the downside, there were people who were sort of hiding or were disconnecting, and who felt separated from where the action was. Sort of there was a tendency there was more action happening on the inside. On the other hand, there were some people who actually felt like they were able to be closer to themselves and to claim some space that was private while still being in the same room with others. And for them, they reported that they really liked that quality. One of the things on the downside of it was that some people were chatting on the outside, and it was disturbing in that way for everybody else around. And then there was also the visceral quality of the fabric that some people played with, and that was a really added dimension to have the soft fabric being touched and being played with. And I like to take some of that additional I don't know, I wouldn't call it props, but things that allow for other physical connection. I don't know whether I would do it again. I myself felt, as the facilitator, a bit separated from when all curtains were closed from the people, because there was a curtain between me and them. And so if there would be a way to achieve, we've done in the end, what we did is we pulled aside the curtains were in the area right in front of where I was sitting. But what would be great, is to really have a microphone that is portable, a wireless microphone, so that I could move, or we could move, and be closer to the people, to everybody in the room. So I think that would counteract the experience of separation. And let's see, and still maintain this additional depth of experience, to have an inside and an outside experience, to play more with different qualities within the room, physical qualities in the room. So that I think that's my takeaway: how to preserve a connection between me and the dancers, and among the dancers, and at the same time bring in some playful variety addition. So definitely, I felt it was a rich experience in all directions.
I will just take this, start with this last piece that you said about the being able to play with the curtains. So there was this concept of inside and outside with it, but it was really cool to see when the people got in contact with the texture of the curtain that separated the two rooms, that it created something with people, and an element of creativity and playfulness that the regular class setting doesn't offer. But I had a very similar experience, and so when I teach the class, I always use a handheld mic, so it's easier for me to like go within the class. And the inside outside, to me, for the experiment that we ran, didn't quite work from that perspective. Actually, there is no inside or outside. There's only one space. But because of the intense emotions and feelings that can come up when we dance, unless we do it regularly, it's very easy to take ourselves out and hide somewhere. And unfortunately, when that happens, then people lose a connection instead of playing with the inside and outside. If it were an all-day dance-a-thon, then having the idea of an inside-outside then gives a little bit more space and fluidity for being in and being part of it, and then going out and taking a break. But that was a big learning for me too, and how to offer the space for outside not to really be outside. And so we played a lot with curtains opening and curtains closing too, so that people were outside, but then there was like, well, a surprise moment because the curtains were open, and then they were back inside.
I see.
Again.
I think it's a good idea to do a one-day dance-a-thon. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah.
We should do that.
So,
Maybe-
one day dance-a-thon,
What do
guys.
you guys think? Should we do that?
So I have one more question. Could you like give some citate of people's feedback? What did people give feedback to you?
Samara, do you want to-
Okay. So, most of the feedback I received were from people that have never danced Five Rhythms before. And for those people, it was opening into a dimension that they've never experienced. There were tears by the end of class. There were people hugging that had never hugged before. And so there was just this element of sweetness. So we went through such an intense experience with the light, with the music, with the sweat. And with all that, we then ended with this paradox of total sweetness and connection between people. Sometimes they were in groups, so there was a lot of people that closed in groups, and there were some people that closed in one-on-one. And for people that have danced Five Rhythms before, some feedback that I got was the space was just not big enough. So they would really love to actually experience something like this in a club setting. So to take it to take this sort of in-between space that we were playing with and really bring that level of consciousness and play to the club setting. There was one person that couldn't stay because the light visuals were too intense for her because of the experiences that she has from dance. But that just reminded me, like, when you go to a concert or something and they tell you that there are going to be strobe lights. And so you know for your own self what you're capable of being in touch with. And then based on that, people can then make a decision on what type of journey they want to take.
Oliver, what feedback did you get?
Let's see. I mentioned one of the feedbacks earlier on. There's one man who's a yogi. He practices 5 times, 6 times a week or so, and he didn't like the experience. He felt it was distracting, and he particularly pointed to the separation through the fabric. He felt that that took away a lot of the experience and sort of made it disjunct.
Was it the inside-outside that gave him that feeling, or was it the lighting?
It was a combination of things. It was the inside-outside. It was the music that tended to be a little bit too techno for him. And the lights and the whole package together for him was not like what he was used to, which is usually, we've been giving our classes in a yoga studio. And so that is a more, how shall I say, a a more meditative yogic environment, and if that's what you expect, coming to the Club Light Wave experiment that we had, you're going to be disappointed because it's not a yoga studio. It doesn't have the smell of yoga mats. It doesn't have the like the the whole all the trappings of yoga, for yoga studio. But it was it had club qualities, and so in some ways it was just one of many impressions, one of many feedbacks. There was another woman who happened to take photographs at the setting too, and she felt it was the best thing that ever happened to her. Her experience was was like a transcendental experience. She was blown away by it, and for her, it was she was on cloud nine. Then there were other people who were the whole, I think, separation of the rooms was something that some people had difficulties with. But then I mentioned one feedback where the person was very happy to find her little cocoon outside, and when she wanted more action, she could go inside. So it's varied, and I think it's probably a good sign. It tells me that it wasn't a total failure. It tells me that we took risks, otherwise we wouldn't get these different feedbacks. I feel like we should experiment more to explore and to hone what we learn from these experiments.
One,
Go ahead.
one last question I would have. Would you say that the setting we did, adding this like a 5 rhythm session with light, is something people who haven't done that before will make that easier to connect to 5 rhythms? Do you know what I mean? I mean, 5 rhythm has sometimes for some people this esoteric touch, which in this context it didn't have that. What would you say?
So definitely. I mean, that was a lot of the feedback that I got. So either people who had never danced 5 rhythms before, or people that come to my class that also like to go and dance in clubs. This sort of played on that line. I mean, for me personally, who actually loves to go and dance at clubs for the music, for the environment, letting go of the connection to alcohol or drugs, I look forward to having more experiments like this, just selfishly, because there aren't that many spaces that offer a meditative experience just in terms of like this urban daily life. And I really also find that people who came to the class, it helped them to get in a meditative space. Yeah, so not everybody dances every week or every day or does yoga every day, or and that gives them then an opportunity, a sort of like a catalyst to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I we were talking about it earlier. I think it's a great way to to bring people, and you've described that some people who had never experienced this before came because of it, and that they had beautiful experiences with it. And I think that's one of the benefits, that we grow the appeal of the 5 rhythms, and because it is, I find, a very transformational, healing experience. It can be that way anyway. So the more the merrier, and definitely we should follow. We should open up the audience, the participant base, and yeah, I mean, I deliberately try to not just during a Club Light Wave to avoid using esoteric words and to stay close to the experience, not so much to concepts or interpretation. So in that way, I think it's, for me, it makes sense to to what I'm interested in anyway.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank
Wonderful,
you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
I need to go to toilet now.
Yeah.
But thank you so much.
You have to open an